Excellent, and welcome everybody. This is PnP Weekly, episode 204. Anyway, so on the PnP Weekly, I always talk about the latest on Microsoft 365 and the related topics like the Power Platform. We've been starting to touch that quite often, which is completely understandable because, you know, Microsoft Cloud kind of connects between each other. It's Microsoft 365, Power Platform, and Azure, which are the big pieces, so to say.
GitHub, don't forget GitHub.
Well, yeah, but it technically GitHub. Yes, it's part of Microsoft. We own Microsoft, but it's still independent,
It's Microsoft.
company.
It's
It's Microsoft Cloud. Yeah, that's fair. I can give it that too. So that is fair. Now I can see my transcript ongoing there. I need to hide that because I will go crazy watching. What is it catching?
What am I saying? What am I saying?
What?
I didn't say that.
Exactly. Cool. Now, my name is Vesa Juvonen. I'm a principal product manager in Microsoft 365 platform areas, and with me as a co-host is.
Hey everybody, my name is Waldek Mastykarz, and I am cloud developer advocate for Microsoft 365 at Microsoft.
And as typically, we do have a visitor in the house who might be familiar. So some people who've been watching the show or been around in Microsoft 365 areas for quite a few years. So Erwin van Hunen is joining us for an interview. He recently joined back to a Rencore to be the CTO, Chief Technology Officer in Rencore. And it's an interesting storyline. We'll talk about that one a bit. We'll talk about his community contributions and community involvement since 2014, which is pretty cool. So he's been around on building, for among other things, PnP PowerShell and a few other things. So I think some people know him as the father of PnP PowerShell, right?
I guess. I don't know. I can't speak to others, but yes, I've heard that.
Yes.
Title being used.
Yes, absolutely.
Out there.
Let's actually jump on that interview, and then we'll come back on the articles right after that. Welcome everyone to the PnP Weekly Show 204. Wasn't that a good intro? No. It's good to make people smile when they join the show.
We are here the whole week.
Nobody knew what happened because we cut that away from the intro, right?
We did?
Anyway, we did. Did we? Remains to be seen. Now, Erwin, you were actually in the show in the PnP Weekly and back in episode 110, and then we thought that it's about time to get you back. That's like 3 years ago or something like that. I didn't actually.
I don't even remember how long it is, but wow. Okay, 3 years.
It's been a while.
Wow.
That is roughly 3 years, 100 episode. Yeah, roughly 2.5 or something like that. So yeah, that's a pretty long time. Now, Erwin, a lot of people might know you, who you are or not. Some of people don't. So can you do a quick intro who you are and what I do for you?
Yeah, I'm Erwin van Hunen. I started with the whole PnP effort. That was already like a long time ago. That was 2014, I think.
Yes.
So next year will be a 10-year anniversary with PnP. Can you imagine? It's mind-blowing. Long history in working in IT, and very recently, like this is my effectively my third week now, back to my previous employer. I am a CTO at Rencore. It's I'm very happy to be back. I did what they apparently call in the industry a boomerang. That was a new term.
You have to go and check out.
You had internship with another company, and now you're back.
Yeah, that's a way of putting it. Indeed, yeah. So and then in my free time, I have been keeping myself the last couple of years quite busy with something called PnP PowerShell. Writing that. I make music as a hobby.
Yes. I saw the latest song from last night was from Tattoo.
Exactly, Loreen. Yes. I made an orchestral rendition of the
I do apologize. Cha 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 is going to take Eurovision this year, but so.
And it might actually happen. I've seen the Finnish entry to Eurovision, and it puzzled me. Let's put it like that. It puzzled me.
Sounds really familiar.
you should check it out. It's if you haven't seen it, if you're in for a mental challenge, then it's Finland in a nutshell, I would say.
You mean the entry for the Eurovision?
The Finnish entry for Eurovision is special. Yes. But it has been growing on me. I have to admit, there is something quirky about it that is, Nevertheless, I made an orchestral version of the Swedish rendition, because Sweden tries to win again with a former winner, Loreen. She comes back this year, and whatever. Check it out.
It is a good chunk, by the way, as well. But anyway, so.
Okay.
You're not listening music. Where's your mainstream? Come on, Waldek.
Well, so there is Eurovision and there is listening to music. Like I'm
no. I think Loreen's tattoo is on pretty much on all of the radio stations right now. So it's
not. I listen to radio like every day when I'm in a car. I was like, no, it's not on the radio.
On which radio?
Which radio? Classic FM, maybe.
Classic FM, yeah. That's
No.
Anyway, now that we covered the Eurovision,
and music tastes apparently.
Yes. Let's do a quick recap on the PnP PowerShell. So you use the PnP is the patterns and practices, and we've been using that term for the community efforts and open source efforts. Nowadays, we actually kind of cut down using that because it's causing so much questions. Is what is this PnP? Those who know, they know, and the PnP PowerShell is obviously, and PnP JS is named with that term as well. But can you talk a bit about the PnP PowerShell? Why was that created, and you created that like 9 years ago, and then you contributed that for free for community, and then it exploded.
Yeah. Okay. You told the whole story.
Okay. Next.
No, I created it out of frustration. At the time, I was a consultant, like you. I'm a recovering consultant, and
I was still a consultant at the time.
Every time I wanted to do a little thing towards Office 365 at the time, Microsoft 365 nowadays, I had to write a little program. A C# program, open Visual Studio, build the code, compile it. And then the downside is that the next time I want to do something very similar, but tiny bit different, I had to open Visual Studio, make a change, and compile it again and run it. And of course, I was already using PowerShell towards the, at the time, very relevant, nowadays somewhat less relevant, on-prem version of SharePoint. And so there you had the whole sort of set of commandlets, I don't know, even like 400 or something like that, I think there were, to do all kinds of things towards the server, but that didn't exist towards SharePoint Online. Yeah. And so that's where my effort of PnP PowerShell came up. And it started very small, couple of commandlets, and I remember actually pinging you, Vesa, because you just announced, it wasn't called PnP at the time, it had a different name.
Office App Samples.
Office Apps
AMS,
Samples.
AMS.
Yes.
Yeah, Office AMS, exactly. And this open source effort.
Model samples, yes. Office AMS.
Yeah. And I pinged you like, hey, listen, I have this set of commandlets. Would that be something? And you were like, yep, give it. And I shared it. And yeah, that was a very small start. And it became very quickly very popular to the levels of today, where it is ridiculously popular. And sort of everyone is using it. And when I remember still seeing some telemetry numbers where we had like, I don't know, what 500,000 numbers were coming in, and we were like, 500,000 requests. Yeah, exactly.
Requests in a
exactly.
month.
Per what unit of time?
Per month.
Per month at the time.
Yeah. And now we're talking billions per month. Yeah. Which is,
I guess it's 500,000 within a day, roughly. So the ratio
easily. It's actually millions per day currently.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Several millions per day. Right. Yeah. So it's
get to be billions. So
yeah, exactly. It's an insane amount, and it's a bit humbling to see it. And okay, as I said, we started with, I don't even know. I remember how many commandlets there were in the beginning, like 40 maybe, something like that.
Yeah.
And now we're over 600.
So when you think about it, so there was a SharePoint Online PowerShell already at the time, but SharePoint Online PowerShell isn't targeted for site level operation or in a list level operation or an item level operation, and that was the thing what was basically missing. So how can you easily in a repeatable way, do operations in a site or in an item level using then the existing APIs. And, that was really the PnP PowerShell sweet spot.
PnP PowerShell is sort of artifact focused, if you want to call it like that. It's like doing things with sites, with lists, with list items, with Teams instances, those kind of things. So very focused on the artifacts that make up your Microsoft 365 environment, whereas the Microsoft provided commands work on the tenant. Yes, you can create site collections with it, etc. But that's where it stops effectively.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But it's actually kind of interesting to think about it that it came out of frustration. So and then
all
it grows to
things
be.
Do right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Honest, you always start with you have an edge to scratch, and these are, I think, the best things that people build, right? Because it's solving a genuine problem you have, and if you have it, what are the odds that somebody else will too, right? And it's not just like trying to create your own market and build up this weird need. No, like you experience the need already time and again, having to build C# code. It's like there has to be an efficient way, and there was, right? So it makes perfect sense.
Well, it's just the same for you, Waldek. I mean, with the CLI.
Exactly, I was coming back on the CLI. The CLI started.
You were a Mac person. There was no way to script towards Microsoft 365 from a Mac, and
and back then, PowerShell on Mac wasn't a thing either, because I think we launched CLI a year or two before PowerShell became available outside Windows, right? So there's also that aspect. Like there was really no other way. And would we have done the same thing today? I don't know. Like interesting thing, but I think it's interesting to think. And there's also something I want to ask you. Like yes, on one hand, it's a tool used by many people across the world every day, but I bet it's also more than that. So what else is it next to just being a tool? And then I can share like my perspective on the work that we do in CLI.
What else is it more than a tool? I'm trying to figure out where
something. Yeah, the perspective, but it's hard to catch up on.
Well, so if I look at CLR, right, like it's a tool that you can use to automate things in 365. But it's also, for many folks, it's their first exposure to open source.
Well,
it's how
fair enough.
People learn about tests. It's how people learn about the APIs. It's how people learn about developing things in Node, right? So it's many different things to many different folks beyond just being one time and again, I hear folks like, hey, I don't get to do X at work. And I get to do that here in CLI. And people bring up things like testing and clean code and working with others from other companies. So it brings so many different things. Like, yes, it's a tool and it's being used for a share, but there's also so many aspects to it, right? So
absolutely.
Even if our growth and the numbers are nowhere near the ones that you've got in PowerShell. And yet I see there is still a place for it as a project because of all these other things that it does.
Now, one of the things that I personally noticed, and what I found really scary in the beginning when I just after I started talking to Vesa about sharing this code, is oops, everyone can now see what I wrote. Everyone can see my coding style. That's something I really want, and that's still for some people, and I totally get it, a bit of a threshold to step over. It's like, am I actually writing good code? And within scope, because what is good code?
Everything is relative,
yeah, exactly. But so it's sort of a way of learning to share what you write and share how you code and learn also from others, because you can just, this whole source library is just for you to consume and to look at and how are people doing it. So it's besides the fact that it is a tool for people to help to use, it is also a way to learn how to write code and learn.
And going even larger and meta within this discussion, we would not be sitting in this meeting without people sharing their code and wisdom and building stuff like CLI or PnP PowerShell, because that's actually making those connections. So it's not just about learning even the technology, it's about the human side of the community, which is creating those connections between people.
Yep. And also the thing is with PnP PowerShell, it's I'm not the one that wrote everything. Absolutely not. Yeah, the first couple of years maybe I was the main developer on it, but nowadays it's like, first of all, there's quite a team now of 3 people behind the scenes that do a lot of work. We have Koen, we have Gautam, we have Veronica. That helped me a lot actually, and helped the organization and the community and the people. And so if you create a pull request, it's very likely one of them approving it. You won't see me approving them. So they help enormously making this popular. But they are sort of the core team, the maintainers of the repo. But then it's all these other people out there that actually have been submitting all these wonderful pieces of commandlet code to the thing. Yep. It's not me. No, it's us and everyone out there that did this amazing work. I wanted to point that out.
I just got an interesting thought, like, because you mentioned that someone, like, you ask, am I writing correct code or something? And it's like, hey, like, there is a way for doing it. And I wonder if you ever tried or thought about it, like, you know, there is this person who used to work at Microsoft who created PowerShell. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about reaching out to him, like, hey, like, we're doing this thing and it's being used. Are we going the direction you envisioned it? Any opinions, thoughts, feelings?
Right. You mean Jeffrey Snover?
Yeah.
No. The closest I've been to Jeffrey Snover is actually that I was in the same speaker room as him. Which I found out later. And then later that day, I passed him on the Microsoft campus. He was walking out of a building on the phone, and I was walking in. So that's the closest I've been.
I think we were together. That was in the Commons or in the building where you have the company store.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, building 90? Is that
92.
90? 92. Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah, so no, that's the closest I've been to Jeffrey. Unfortunately, I mean, probably good for him, but he left Microsoft.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, that doesn't mean I would not be able to get in touch with him. No, exactly.
I still see him regularly talk on PowerShell in community, so I still bet that if you ask him a thing, he would have an opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, I follow him on Twitter, and he has opinions. Yeah. But no, I never thought of reaching out to him, actually, to be honest. No, maybe I should. Yeah.
Well, it's what is it? Tens of billions of requests every single month going through that open source projects, and there's like 600 commandlets, 700. Do you remember where we are?
600, 620, I think, right now.
Across the whole Microsoft
last number.
Stack.
Yeah.
And usage is growing, so it's
still growing. It's crazy. And we just released a new version, just fresh from the press, a new version, which has a bit of an, I have to, sorry for that, a tiny bit of an ugly version number.
2.2.2?
2.1.1.
2.1.1, yes.
We wanted to, and I have to go full disclosure, we made a mistake. And it has to do with how we release nightly releases. And we started to release the nightly releases of this new version already as 2.0-nightly. And that meant that we couldn't publish it 2.0 because that wouldn't be older than the...
Right.
Yeah, so we had to release a 2.1. So that came out last Friday as 2.1.0. And approximately half an hour later, we found out that we made a mistake. And in the way we sign things, or actually we sign all the files, or not the required files. And one of the files is effectively a text file, it's a PSD1 file in PowerShell. And that one contained some information that the PowerShell gallery didn't accept. So we had to remove that, and we removed that and we published. But we did not think about that the signature that is embedded in that file was not matching the content of the file anymore. So we had to release a 2.1.1.
Happens.
It's fine. It happens.
Yeah, it's out now. Fortunately, it's of course still multi-platform, so Mac, Linux, Windows. However, that's a big change, and that's why it's a 2 and not a 1.x anymore. It does not support PowerShell 5 anymore.
Now, for those who are not super familiar with that, can you explain what is PowerPoint 5, PowerPoint 5, and
PowerShell?
PowerShell 5. PowerShell 5 is also known as Windows PowerShell.
Power.
Something with power. Not apps, not flow, but shell.
I got the power.
Windows PowerShell or PowerShell 5. Most people know that PowerShell version from the fact that it has a blue background. If you launch it, you get a blue background. Is the one that comes with Windows, and that is very still built on the old .NET versions, so .NET 4.x. Yep. And we always have been building two builds. Since we started to move to the multi-platform version, we built two versions out of the same source code. So we built the version for PS5 or Windows PowerShell based on the old .NET, and one on .NET Core, which was working on PowerShell 6 and 7. Now we dropped the PowerShell 5 because that one was getting more and more in the way for us because it's older .NET code, and the new PowerShell version is now built on .NET 6, and that meant that if we would combine the two, then in the longer run you would see commandlets not appearing on Windows PowerShell 5 because we couldn't do that because that didn't exist in that version of .NET, and etc. So we decided to drop the Windows PowerShell or PowerShell 5 support. So you will have to install, because that is not coming with Windows. In order to run those PowerShell commands, you will have to download the new PowerShell, which is PowerShell 7, from GitHub. And if you go to Microsoft or learn.microsoft.com, you will find, and you search for PowerShell, you will find installation guides on how to get that.
And it's heavily being promoted by Microsoft as the version to use as well. So
it's absolutely the version to use. It's day and night different in performance, in memory footprint, in everything. And if you are on Windows, you combine it with Windows Terminal, it's a magical environment because the Windows Terminal is a really, really good terminal tool. I love it. So if you combine those two, beautiful. However, I'm on the Mac nowadays.
Which terminal do you use?
I use iTerm 2. Okay. Yeah. And PowerShell is my main shell. I don't use Bash or whatever shell, or C shell, or whatever shell is the default one. No, PowerShell is my default shell on the Mac with PnP PowerShell on it. Yeah. Yes, and it compiles. We compile it, so I build it on the Mac. And
And if you closely listen the shell, you can hear to see.
Exactly. Very close to the screen. You can hear the waves.
So you worked on PnP PowerShell for, you mentioned 9 years, almost 10. You reminisce a little where it began with you having an itch to scratch your own thing, building out a team. Where do you see it go in the next, give or take, 3 years? Let's not make it too far out, because it's going to be it's, this autonomous, self-conscious thing that can bring. No. Let's bring it a little bit back. 3 years. Where do you see PnP PowerShell being in 3 years?
Well, we've been thinking about effectively a complete rewrite of the. So many of the commandlets in PnP PowerShell today are they do one single commandlet can do a lot of things depending on the switches you provide. And while that is maybe very powerful, it also makes it a lot of code to maintain for that single commandlet, and a lot of edge cases and tests and whatever. So we have been playing with the thought of why don't we break those apart and make specific commandlets for a specific task. So that commandlet does that thing and only that thing. Very specific, very simplified. The downside of that approach is that we probably will increase our commandlet set with close to 300 more commandlets, and it is a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of work.
There's another one thing to it too, a caveat, which is that is kind of this ever ongoing pendulum swing. Where you err on the side of projecting API onto the shell, and you basically have each API call is a commandlet, and people can have more control of the way they tie them up with the benefit of performance, because the thing will only do exactly the things you want to do and nothing more. With the caveat, now you need to know about all intricacies that now you solve with scenario-based commandlet. So do you go with the API or do you go with scenarios? And it's kind of
fair enough.
Bundling.
That's a very good point you bring up, and I think it's very good to understand that we absolutely do not want to step away from the scenario-based command.
That's what I was referring to. Yeah,
absolutely not.
So
we do
not
just
want existing commandlets which are basically doing multiple scenarios depending on switches. So just to be clear.
Yes, but some of those commandlets are even like army knives in itself. And that, for instance, the biggest one and the most complex one is the one that everyone uses before they start to do anything, and that's connect PnP online.
Right.
That one is ridiculous. What is happening behind the scenes, because there's so many switches, because there's so many ways of authenticating. That is, I think, also one of the strengths of PnP PowerShell, that there are so many, like device login, interactive login, etc., etc., etc. But that one makes it very complex to maintain. And there are more of those commandlets out there that could actually benefit from breaking up into several commandlets, not API connected, no, scenario connected, but a single commandlet can handle maybe 3 different scenarios, and that could also be 3 different commandlets, and that's something we've been playing with. But the idea, and we even made a very early brief announcement that we would do it, but then the more and more we started to work with that, the more we realized that it was so much work, and it will probably be a never-ending thing. So for now, we'll leave it at that. What else is happening? Well, we will see probably more and more and more and more coverage also for non-share. I mean, of course, the main player in the PnP PowerShell world is SharePoint Online. Well, you'll see more and more scenarios coming where it's not focusing on only SharePoint Online, but also all the other products, environments, areas. Workloads, that's the word. Thank you. In Microsoft 365, like Viva and et cetera, if APIs are available. Because that's the dependency we have. We have a strong, of course, we cannot invent something. It's not like, oh, we have backdoor access to things. No, we don't. We use the same APIs that every other developer can use. And so we are very much limited, is a way of saying it. But
no. Well, so that's like, now that I think about it, I wonder if that would be worth reason, because like we have exactly the same limit in CLI, and especially the limiting part is when things like don't have an API. So is there a way for us to build kind of, I don't know, bridge or automation with things like Playwright or RPA, where you use the UI for things that don't have an API, you use kind of interop.
Screen scraping.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Technically, that would be possible. In reality, I'm saying let's not go there. We've been playing with the thought, and I know there are commandlets, I will not name them, that do things in a very debatable way. Because we figured out where certain information is stored. For instance, I will not go into much detail, but there is a commandlet that calls, for instance, into a document library where there's a folder that people normally don't see if they browse around. There is a file in there with an extension that does not reflect the contents. It actually says HTML, but there is no HTML in there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, exactly. Well, you could question how the original product implementation came to life. It's
an MVP.
How that worked in SharePoint Online, you can question that, but regardless of that, so there is no official API to actually do that. We had to figure that out. But I prefer to stick to either the Graph APIs or CSAM or REST. Yeah.
Now. 2 questions. I know we need to close up pretty soon as well. From a timing perspective, there would be so many things to talk about. But first of all, from a Microsoft perspective, and of course from a community and customer perspective, how do you see, why do we have all of this open source? I'm going to ask the question which somebody might be wondering who's listening or watching. Why do we have these kind of an open source projects in first place? Because if you look at this from an enterprise customer perspective or a mid-sized or whatever customer perspective, they might be looking into, well, I don't want to use open source. I don't want to. Why are you causing a chaos? Why aren't we using just the commandlets which are coming out of the product?
Why wouldn't you want to use open source? What is the problem with that?
Well, it's the trust and legal potential liability implications on
Well,
it.
but so you're not want to use open source. You don't want to use something that isn't backed by SLA, because one does not mean the other. Like VS Code is open source thing, but it's still a very much a product.
Yeah, true. Perception,
just to be really clear, like what is really open source.
Exactly.
Actually, .NET itself is open source.
Exactly.
That's true as well. That is.
I don't want to use open source. Like I don't understand that. Okay.
No, it's the SLA.
Why do we then need to have this other open source project? Isn't this just causing additional things which people need to learn? What's the value out of them? And again, I'm just. Trust me on this. I know.
I know.
Putting myself on the roll.
Nothing negative against Microsoft, but it's, for instance, speed. Because we're not depending on corporate procedures, etc., we can usually act faster. Like someone in the world out there probably maybe already wrote a solution for a problem, and the moment it becomes a real problem, that person can easily submit that code into our repository, and we can merge that. So that's one of the things. Effectively, we can be faster and leaner and meaner when it comes to functionality. We're also, because we are community-based, not necessarily bound by guidelines that come from a player like Microsoft, for instance. So we can be a bit more flexible in how we do things. So in general, it's just availability and for instance, let's take this one as an example. The comparison of the Microsoft provided SharePoint Online cmdlets, the SharePoint Online management shell, which from an authentication perspective, so connecting, is way more limited than what PnP PowerShell offers. So that's
what CLI even offers. That's true.
Fair enough. So, yeah. So flexibility, performance, not in performance in executing, but in performance of implementing
agility,
changes.
More resources, but then is quality worse because it's not coming from Microsoft?
I'd like to believe not. I like to believe the quality is not worse. Of course, it's not that because you create a PR, it will be merged. No, there are very critical people looking at those PRs, very good developers that decide if they like your code or not, have a discussion with it. And those discussions happen, and they can be intense at times. No, the quality is not necessarily worse. No.
And that really comes back on again on there's so many smart developers who are working also outside of Microsoft and making things. They're building their own things. They might be in a startup or in another companies, and they need to get stuff done. One of the classic examples being something like remote provisioning is just a brilliant example with its usage and everything else. We still don't have a similar templating engine, unfortunately, in the product. So therefore, the community addressed the gap to make things happen and to go forward with the implementation. It's an interesting dynamics though. So
it's very interesting, and it's also interesting to see how community efforts over time become the de facto standard in doing things.
Sure.
If you say provisioning nowadays, you basically say PnP. I'm not saying PnP PowerShell because PnP PowerShell is merely a consumer of that provisioning engine, which is built in the PnP framework. But it sort of becomes a de facto standard. And it's the same way sort of with PnP PowerShell is also over time become the de facto standard to script towards Microsoft 365. And that shows, I mean, there's like companies using it commercially, and they can just use it. They can copy it, modify it, make it their own.
Because of the community initiative for that to be such a successful thing and taking over the world by a storm, it's just the demand. And of course, whenever there's an out-of-the-box feature, yes, we can flip on using that whenever you can achieve the similar things using the out-of-the-box functionalities and all of that. But it's a really interesting dynamics. So
another thing that I wanted to touch about the question about quality and if it's good, we have the benefit of the numbers. It's so many people using it. If something goes wrong, we'll hear that.
Yeah,
we will absolutely be told and actually being pushed to fix it as soon as possible.
Now, we've done this exercise a few times in the past as well, but what would be the 3 to 5, let's say, tips for somebody who's building open source? 3.5, 3.75. So the tips for starting to build an open source project. Of course, putting stuff in a GitHub. Sure, cool, okay, but do you actually listen and watch comments, issues, all of that stuff? That's another step number one. But what makes a project successful? What are the things which makes the PnP PowerShell or CLI so successful as they are?
I think you should realize that first, before you start to say you want to start your own open source project, solve a problem. Whatever that problem is, solve a problem. That's one. The other one, it will take time.
Yeah.
Don't think that putting it out there that's enough. It is not. It will require a lot of time and effort from your end as a maintainer of that repository, and maybe also the original developer of that source of that code, to maintain that and make it successful. And listen to the people. They are the one using it. You of course, you're probably also the one using it, but you write it effectively for the others. And if you
want others to succeed,
if you want others to succeed, yeah. Exactly. And if you want your project to become big and very useful, you're not writing it for yourself. You're writing it for others.
Yeah. Any additional thoughts, Waldek?
Bunch. So that's an interesting thing, right? Because when you build something for yourself, the moment you open it up, if you open it up for others to submit issues and PRs, you become maintainer of it, right? And you kind of are being driven by demands of the others, and it's kind of weird balance, like how the success of the project depends on you being there, willing to help people troubleshoot their things, add additional features, patches, and so forth and so on. That comes at the time of or at the cost of your health balance, work balance, because like you need to have, like, at the end of the day, it's just time, and you can spend all of it once. So it's like, yes, like we all aspire having that, unicorn project with millions of folk using, but how do you scale for that? How will you be able, to be able to close the lid at reasonable time in the evening, have personal life, and not being lived by the things you created, which are really cool and used, but then the stress on you. And you probably have seen all, the meme with the kind of like this weird thing assembled on top of the thing, and like this whole thing standing on this little thing, like maintained by a random dude somewhere where in Ohio. And that's exactly that. Like you're building something for millions of people to use, which they can, but at the end of the day, it's you. Like, what is your idea for scaling, continuity? How do you see that? Because in a way, it's like, yes, it's a chicken and egg in a sense that it's not the first thing for you to worry about, but the moment you start getting traction, it's too late. So you kind of have to have like an idea, like how will you go beyond you? Like, what if that thing becomes a thing? Like, so how, like, what would be how do you envision onboarding others and growing with others and getting them through that, user, contributor, maintainer journey? And how do you bring them in?
What do you give back for the others who are contributing so that they feel that they're being awarded or appreciated for their contributions? And that takes time away from you writing the code. So you will not write the code anymore, because then you're dependent on, and it gets complicated. But
who will write the code?
Yes,
AI,
but who will then write the code? And then will you just appreciate and send messages about the ChatGPT because it's writing all the code? Never.
Welcome, you became a CEO.
That challenge we had with PnP PowerShell, actually, it became so big, and I couldn't do it alone anymore because I also had a day job and a life. That's a weird concept at times, but yeah. What we did is we looked at the contributors who were very active, and lucky enough, some of these contributors were so passionate that they wanted to step up and help out. And I think that's a great team, and they know the product inside out. They know.
But
exactly.
Even when you do that. So that's momentarily, that's even more work, because then that I think that's the key challenge. And coming back on what Waldek was saying, that when it starts exploding, to be able to start scaling on maintainers, actually you should not be on a burnout situation, because actually to be able to scale, you need to work more, because you need to help the maintainers to actually get access. And then after a while, you can a bit fade on the background and be like, oh, oh, it's working.
Yeah.
Or if it's working or not.
And that comes there with that story comes the fact that I think most people that start an open source project are opinionated on what is the right thing to do. And they have a lot of things in their head. This is the way you do it. I mean, that was the same for me. This is how you write a commandlet. This is what should be done. This is not should do. I mean, there are some guidelines out there in the world on how to write commandlets, but there's also a lot of stuff internally that I like to be done like this and that, whatever. And you had to transfer that thinking to your team members because you're traditionally very opinionated about your little brainchild, and so it's quite a process in moving. And also sort of disconnecting you a tiny bit more from that product because others are also, you need full trust. Although if you don't give them the trust, nothing will happen. I mean, you can't micromanage that. That makes no sense. You want a skill. That means you don't micromanage.
Which is all about communication again.
Yeah, it's also an interesting part, well, right? It's even more than that, right? Because like the moment you create, like you want to, a while back, somebody told me this analogy that, you know, there are folks who dominate, and it's just, you say, like, there are folks who have an opinion on things, and that is exactly why you led an initiative, right? But that also can lead to times you or somebody else taking all the air out of the room.
Sure.
And when you have other folks in the room, well, they need to breathe too. Like, they need to also have the empowerment, because that is like, you want them to help, but you also need to put them in place to be able to help. Like, you cannot just step in every single time and swoop in, like, let me take, like, no. And probably they will fail, right? Because, like, again, coming back, you have opinions in your head about how things will be done. And some of these things, I mean, my experience, are easy to codify. Coding standards where we put brackets on this or that line. There are tools that can help us enforce that across the code base. But there are regular times, especially as the more you grow, like the gray areas. How do we respond to an issue? How do we do? And that is really the hard thing, because it's kind of the cultural thing. Like, how do we react to folks? Like, how do we go outside? Like, what is experience for folks to get to us? Like, what do they see? Are we welcoming? Are we friendly? Are we geeky? How do you codify that? Like, it's almost like a culture building thing. And you're like, you started as a coder, you wrote a piece of code, and now you need to think about culture. Like, that's quite a leap.
Sure.
Sure.
It's a completely different skill set and completely different set of things which you need to focus on, for sure.
Again, welcome. You became a CEO.
It's interesting. Now, from a timing perspective, I guess we need to start closing up as well. What's happening, Erwin, this week? Anything interesting on your side?
Well, I'm still onboarding myself in my new job, so for me, it's a lot of learning. It's a fascinating company. I'm really enthusiastic of being back there. Very fascinating product, and as I said, I'm still onboarding myself and actually talking to a lot of my new team members and getting to know them. So I'm at that level.
Communication.
Yes.
Do you know already what will be the first thing you will fix?
I know, but I will not mention that.
Okay. Just us among friends. Like, we will not tell anybody.
Yes, not tell anybody. No, not at all. Waldek, what about you? Anything interesting on this week?
Taking well, on one hand, trying to take a moment to breathe, because we finished the hackathon. We announced the winners. We were wrapping things up, so we did a retrospective within our teams. Then we need to do another one with everybody else who was involved. We shipped a new version of Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy, of CLI, so that is already done. But now it's a new week, new month, so it's like
Easter break. So
on Friday, yeah. So this will be a short week, 4 days only. But there's still more than enough work to be done.
And Monday, right?
Sorry.
And Monday as well.
That depends on the country. I don't think in the Netherlands.
Really?
I don't know.
Oh,
no.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So
we've
got an extra week. Yeah.
Oh, okay. The Monday you got a day off too? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But still, it's just like, it's a short week, but it's not short week of work. So there is still a pile of work, preparing everything, preparing for build, trying to sort things out there, and then the regular work. Like, we have a bunch of new ideas for proxy, for CLI. That work doesn't stop, and it's a really cool thing. On one hand, like, we're never run short of ideas, but on the other hand, you're never really done. So that's also a mindset change that you have to have. Like you're never done in a product, and that's a great learning point for anybody who's the only experience have is with working on projects and then coming to work on a product. A project has a beginning and an end, and you're done and you're finished. You ship it and you're done. You walk away. You'd never have that in product. Never. It's never finished.
True.
Well, every single product has a life cycle. Now, that life cycle can be 3 months to 30 months, 30 years. So it's kind of
SharePoint, 20 years. What do you mean?
Exactly. So, no, I said 30 years. So
there you go, yeah.
Oh, is this an announcement? Did you just make?
No, but it's the life cycle of a project and life cycle of a product is completely different thing. And yes, certain similarities, not at all, most of the cases for sure. So we're looking into releasing the SharePoint Framework 1.17 on tomorrow, 4th of April. So that's going to happen. So that's a good example. It's the 17th. But I think 18th or 19th version of SharePoint Framework since the beginning of SharePoint Framework. So since 2017 GAing. But it's interesting to keep on almost quarterly releases, adding things, adding functionalities, have a massive backlog of things, trying to decide which to bid on, and then the community, customer, partner, internal interest, and politics impacting on what's actually happening. So, but it's product. Product is never finished. So, but as said, luckily spring is coming. We're having clear tarmac pretty soon, which is awesome. More stuff to do with the bike and skates, which is
don't break yourself.
What I'm waiting for.
Whatever you do, don't break yourself.
I just been waiting here for 6 months. I just want to go.
You can wait for a few months more.
Yeah. They have versions without wheels. You use them on ice. It's like,
no, but it's not the same thing. So it's missing that danger moment. So
okay.
Well, now
you can ice skate on the lakes. So there's this really cool thing. I don't know if that was done in
there's no
Finland. There are folks who they ice skate on a really thin ice on the lake where the ice sinks.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
They have these really like I don't know what they're called, like speed ice skating, like really long, and they just go, and you're like, basically like you're a shark. The moment you stop, you will die.
Exactly. But there's a good point, Vesa. It's not downhill on the lake. No.
Yeah, that's true. So.
I mean, maybe there is a waterfall somewhere.
Exactly, a waterfall, a frozen waterfall. Yeah.
Anyway, I guess that's it for this one. Thank you, Erwin, joining us. It's been a while since 110 episodes, so almost 100 episodes between. So time flies.
Yeah,
you're having fun. But also, thank you for being part of the community effort since 2014, which is mind-blowing. Actually, we're gonna have 10-year anniversary coming soon. Actually, right about this time, I started the project which pre-existed. I did a massive, multi-month-long project for one customer, which pre-existed the adding model transformation guidance, and from there, a lot of the PnP stuff actually happened. So, in some sense, it's like a 10-year anniversary coming soon. But the public one is August 2024, so or roughly like that. So, we'll see.
With another year.
Actually, it's SPC 2014 with Office AMS, and that was in March 2014, something like that. That was the public moment.
So
anyway,
another year.
So we just need to go one more year, and then we can say
10 years. So what are we going to do next? 20 years.
No. I think of course, whatever it was at the time has transformed to be much bigger. But it's the same, similar mindset is the same. The sharing is caring mentality, helping people and addressing gaps. So I think that's same. My mindset is still there with all of the people, all of the contributors in CLI, all of the contributors in PnP PowerShell. It's all about helping other people to make their work happen, which is brilliant, actually. So thank you for that, by the way. But I guess that's it for now. Thank you, Erwin. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
We'll jump on the weekly articles right from here. Now, thank you, Erwin, for joining us on the PnP Weekly one more time. Great to catch up. Well, we do catch up on quite a few times throughout the week as well, because throughout our community engagement and planning and a few other things. So but still good to talk about the business as well, so which is really, really good. Now, I think it's time to jump to the articles, right?
Yes.
Waldek?
What do we have this week?
A lot of news from Microsoft. It's been pretty busy too, now 2 weeks or 3 weeks even, with the Copilot announcement, the Loop announcement, and now the Microsoft Teams has a new version and new era starting up. So let's start with that, because that is of course a big thing. We are, by the way, recording even these shows using Microsoft Teams. So if you don't know that we're using that, some people might be using some other software. I don't know why we ended up actually using this, but at least it's incredibly easy.
Works. It's like you can make
Yes.
it really complicated and setups, and it's like let's just get it done.
Yes, exactly.
And we never switched, which is like,
yeah,
huh?
True. Fair point. That's true as well. We've been doing this for quite a few. Anyway, but Microsoft Teams has a version 2 preview version out, and is significantly faster, significantly better. A lot of improvements, especially the whole baseline has been re-implemented. And I think even the launch time, you can actually see the reaction is significantly better in the new Teams, which is good. It almost feels bad actually that we're calling this out, but it's improvement. 9.1 seconds.
It is, and I mean, like, I wouldn't say it's better. Like, when you build a product, you make trade-offs with regards to architectures,
Sure.
features, and so forth and so on, and things evolve over time. And maybe what worked 4 years back, or how many years back we built it initially, maybe over time, as we kept adding features, we realized, hey, like, at this scale, with the feature set that we have, it's no longer a viable thing, and we need to rethink things. So it's perfectly fine, to learn. And it's like, oftentimes you get the comments like that from folks who've never built anything at scale, and it's like, well, I mean, yes, in an ideal world,
why didn't you write that once properly?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. But that's not the reality. I mean, actually, we might have building it for 5 years and never release anything, or we release something, we learned, and we evolved from there. So
Yes, that is called an MVP, which in the internal terms, which is also minimum viable product. In this case, it wasn't a minimum viable product. Let me be clear.
I mean, it was once, and then we shipped it
once. And yes, exactly. No, yeah. So anyway, but and it's not actually that rare that some point of a life cycle of a product which is this level of a success, 280 million monthly active users, and even more than that, but we haven't updated that public number since last December. So it's growing rapidly. So at some point, you just really need to rethink the architecture and take advantage of what has come up within the past 4 years or 5 years and so on. So completely understandable. Now, related on the Teams, new Teams, there was this primary article from Jeff Teeper from the Microsoft 365 blog, and then there was another from the Microsoft Teams from Anup Bhatnaik, also calling out the individual things and improvements and all of that, and what's better and the features. Quite a few articles actually related on that one, but what we wanted to mention them all because it's actually good to catch up on the different perspectives. One of them being the fact that you can actually enable the new Microsoft Teams to subset of your people, subset of your organization, and how do you do that? So a good article on actually that. Makes sense if you have a large company that you want to first pilot the new experience within a small group of people and then more broadly distribute that. Now, the change is not super significant from a UX perspective. The features and functionalities are still the same. So it's not like we're shuffling the navigation to somewhere else or whatever we've been doing in the past, maybe for some products. Somebody make a reference on something related on that. It was Kathy made a reference on us shuffling the gears menu in SharePoint.
Oh, yeah. It was on the right, then we moved it to the left. Now it's on the right again. Shall we move it to the left?
Yes. Then there was a announcement, not directly related on the Microsoft Teams feed too. I'm going to talk about this one. We'll take the next one. But still, as part of this and announcements, we Finns, we don't talk that much. So it's related on Microsoft Teams announcement.
So no one ever.
Yes. Is the new avatars. So these are now in public preview, so they're available more broadly. We've been internally using them for quite a long time, actually, and probably people have been seeing teasers and pictures out of them for quite a long time. Now you can actually test them out and you can build your own avatar behind the scenes. So that's actually really cool as well. So there's a lot of different capabilities and features, and there's going to be interesting, let's say, future announcements related on all of this stuff in future. Cool. Now, Microsoft 365 conference. What is this? What?
Yes, it's a flagship event in Vegas in the US, where, as you can see at the lineup, we've got Jeff Teeper, Kirk Koningsbauer, Rajesh Jha, Charles Lamana, Caruana Atimu, Dan Holm. Basically, the group of people who, if there's somebody who has something to say about a product in a authoritative way, that's this group.
Sure.
Right? So we have the leaders at Microsoft talking about the products that they build and manage. So this is definitely, like, if you want to hear where we are, where we're going, this is the place to be. May 2 to May 4, 2023 in Las Vegas in the US.
Yeah, and there's even pre-conference workshops and all of those available. So the main conference is from 2nd to 4th, but it actually starts on 13th or 31st. I can't remember. Is there a 31st day in April? Is there? I know I need to actually double check. Where's my mouse?
No, there's not.
So April it's 13th. Yeah, Sunday is
and then May 1.
So, cool. Now, there was also a storyline from Mark Cashman related on the service that SharePoint built, a cumulative evolution story. So this has been a storyline together with Susan Hanley and Rebecca Jackson. So basically, Mark and Susan have actually built something similar in the past, where the SharePoint monkey tells a story. And now it's basically the SharePoint monkey telling another story related on the different features and capabilities which are built on top of the SharePoint, which isn't actually bad and wrong. It is actually true, but it's actually, for those who don't necessarily know this historical thing, they might be like, wait, what?
This is really impressive to see, like, going all the way back to 1998 site server. And yes. It only shows at the scale of time, how things evolved over time. And
yes.
I was around since late 2006. So it's like I missed the first quarter or a third. And then everything else, I've seen that too. I know this icon. I know this thing too. I know, it's like, wow, we came a long way.
That's, by the way, SharePoint Workbench. That was the Groove. Workspace, yeah, and which was called actually Groove before it was rebranded as that, and it was Groove.exe, which was actually running. It was groovy. Anyway. Let's go in here. Now, on the Viva Connection side, there's a lot of step-by-step improvements. So we actually have been showing the Viva Connection in the tablet device view for quite a long time. Now it's actually rolling out, so you can actually see a tablet optimized experience within your iPad or iPad, iPad as we call them, right?
Yes, on a tablet.
Yes, on a tablet. That's true. So that's now rolling out. It is actually available. I think it's early April 2023. It is early April 2023. It's rolling out.
And this is the new Viva Home experience, or is
that's
it
the new
connections?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, this is basically the optimized Viva Connection experience. The new one, Viva Home, Viva Connection / Viva Home. But it's also now taking the form factor into account when it's a tablet. So
cool.
Adapting directly on that.
Very cool.
Then we had a news from Viva Goals. So basically, I'm not just as well talk about this one. And this is basically sorry. So we use Viva Goals internally, and this is basically just a reference point on how we should be approaching Viva Goals and those OKRs. So as we are creating OKRs and objectives, how would it be recommended to actually build them up? Acquiring starting using Viva Goals is not just taking the product into use. You actually, it's good to think, how do we actually use the product? And that's where the OKRs are important. So objectives and key results. So business process optimization, so to say. You'll take this one, right?
Yes, exactly. One of the things that we hear a lot at Microsoft, and we experience a lot, is that oftentimes we see a common set of errors or issues that vendors come across when they want to submit their Office add-ins to App Stores. So to get it out of the way, to make it easier, to help basically avoid people running into the same issues over and over again, we put together a list of top 5 app source validation errors for Office add-ins, right? So we've seen over the course of time what things failed the most often. We put together a list, comprehensive list with policies, additional info, so that if you build Office add-ins, check this list out and avoid these issues, shortening your time to store.
Absolutely makes sense. Then we had an announcement related on SharePoint Framework 1.17 release candidate. This is, as we're recording this on 3rd of April, and this is almost like yesterday's news because we're going to go GA on the 4th of April. So, but still, there was an article on the developer blog that the release candidate is out and what's available there. We're going to provide additional documentation, all of that gradually for the release as well. So a lot of cool stuff, additional things available for SharePoint Framework 1.17. Yes. Then we go in here.
Exactly. I create a Teams tab and Outlook add-in with a Hello World project, right? So you might have heard last week we had an online event, and that event was all about how you can build Teams apps and how you can get more out of them by exposing them in Outlook and Office.com, right? And in this article, Rabia walks us through the steps like, how would you build it? How would you build that app that is available across multiple locations, right? So it's in Teams, it's in Office. How does that work? So you will have with this a step-by-step walkthrough of building that app, and which is pretty cool.
Yep, absolutely. Really, really cool stuff. Thank you, Robbie, on that one. And then this is the actual event. We maybe should have shuffled the article order. Doesn't matter. So build once, deploy efficiently, connect across Microsoft 365. And as Waldek was saying, it's all about taking those existing Microsoft Teams apps and exposing them to be available more broadly within the Microsoft 365. So reaching more audiences without any actual, let's say, additional investment. So any application technically works across the whole thing. And then within your application, in your code, you can, of course, detect, oh, I'm in Outlook. I'm going to provide more specific functionalities for Outlook. I'm in this context. What is my context? What's happening here? Which adds additional value.
And it's actually twofold, right? Because like one is the context. Like you might be looking at the host, but actually what's even cooler is that you can look at what things are available to me. So in other words, maybe you've got in your app, you care about the ability to send email. So as such, you don't have to care about, am I in Outlook, and infer from that I know that Outlook has the ability to do X, Y, and Z. Like instead, you can ask, am I in a host capable of sending email?
Yep.
Who knows? Maybe at some point we'll be able to send emails from Teams, right? So as such, it kind of simplifies the detections of things.
Yes.
Like
who knows?
Maybe you can start chat in Outlook. I don't know, right?
Yep.
So
exactly.
Right. So it just is kind of interesting way to look at your app and think about what is it that you want to do, and less about where you are in.
Exactly.
Like the host is important for the branding part. And maybe you want to align, like in Teams, you want to be purple, whereas in Outlook, you want to be blue, and so forth and so on. But it's more about, like when it comes to features in your apps, it's more interesting to look at what features are available from your host, right? So there's also like other way to look at that.
Yeah, Absolutely. And then, as said within the Rapia's comment or our blog article already, we are also adding a new feature, which is including the capability of having Outlook add-ins within the same solution at the Teams toolkit. So you can technically use the Outlook JSON object model and do functionalities there gradually as well. So that's now in public preview as well. So improvements,
cool.
Changes. Yep.
Everything coming into one. Yes.
Everything coming into one.
Awesome change.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. Really cool stuff. Now, this one, Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy, a new version then.
Yes, a new preview version 0.6, with the ability to monitor requests from specific process, something you asked us a lot. Like, the proxy works so well that when you turn it on, Teams doesn't work, OneDrive doesn't work, because proxy is throwing chaos back at all those apps, because they work on Microsoft Graph, right? So you ask, like, yeah, this is cool. This is as cool as it is to see. I still want to be able to do my work and be available. So could we please have the ability to just intercept specific things? Now you can, right? Another thing that we introduced at Microsoft a while back already is the idea of rate limiting. So we use the response headers to communicate how many resources are left before you exceed them and get into these 4 to 9 too many request errors, right? And currently that information is available on the Microsoft Graph API's endpoints that are backed by SharePoint, so like sites, files, and so forth and so on. So you can test that already with that. You can test how your app is going to handle the additional info that we offer it, so that you can stay under that limit and basically increase the throughput of your app. So this is also really cool and convenient way to test your apps, right? Yep. And on top, we also offer improvements, or we extended the guidance around paging. And another one is for the client request ID that every request you issue to Microsoft Graph should have. That is a very important thing. So we added that too. TLDR, give it a try. Tell us what you think, and if you have ideas for improvements, we'd love to hear.
Yep, absolutely. You'll probably want to talk about the Hack Together as well, because there was now the winners being announced.
Correct. So beginning of March 1 through March 15, we ran a virtual online hackathon around the Microsoft Graph and .NET. It took us a while, and we had a huge amount of engagement projects. Took us a while, but we went through all of them, and it was so cool to see. Like, people did such a great creative things. We had to pick only 3 winners. So went back and forth, like, which one do we pick? Because there are so many cool things. We picked 3 winners, right? So we have a really cool app that uses natural language to help you plan your app, and that is a Windows desktop app. Then we had another app, second place, which allows students to take picture of a roster that they have for a class and turn that into appointments in Outlook. Very convenient way to plan your week. And then third one was something really cool, a console app that uses, again, ChatGPT to turn your queries expressed in natural language into calls to Microsoft Graph API. Like, think about, like, how cool is that? Instead of saying https://graph.microsoft.com/v10/users files, they're saying, hey, I want to see files from Steve. And you have the call, and the request comes back with the data. So it's like very cool. So these are just the top 3. Check them out. We also link to all hacks that we got. So definitely check them out.
Absolutely, really cool stuff, and awesome to see all of the contributions for sure. And there's quite a few of them, which is great. Now, there was also an update from the education side of the house, so introducing Microsoft Viva Connection for education, and this is a really cool set of capabilities directly within the Microsoft Viva Connection. So additional set of cards, additional set of extensibility, and additional set of options which are available. So absolutely brilliant stuff. So if you are in the education industry or in the world, check it out. And if I remember correctly, I'm feeling bad now about saying that. Of course, it's for partners, but I think the baseline capabilities are free, unless I'm completely mistaken, which is really cool. Now I cannot sign that completely. So, but there is no license for Viva Connection in general. So, and EDU is also free for educational organizations. So it might be. We need to double check things. Anyway, really, really cool. And then on the Power App side, there was a really cool announcement. We've been waiting this for a while, right, Waldek?
Exactly. Modern controls coming to Canvas apps. With that means you can more easily make beautifully looking Canvas apps in Power Apps. So this is really, really cool. So spend less time on the UI and make things look great out of the box. Really, really cool.
Yeah, something which we still would love to have within these controls is a way of extracting and creating your own controls, extracting that and putting it in another tenant, kind of extract and deploy individual controls, which is not yet possible, but who knows, that might be available at some point. That we'll see. Now, on the Microsoft 365 Power Platform community blog, we had the PnP PowerShell 2.11 released. Actually, you heard within the Erwin's discussion why it was called version 2.11 because human mistakes. So it's basically PnP PowerShell version 2, which only works in the PowerShell 7x forward. So really, really cool stuff. Additional improvements, a lot of awesome stuff, and a lot of contributors within this release as well. So thank you everybody for that. Absolutely brilliant. Then we had a CLI 6.4 version released.
Exactly. New version of CLI with a ton of improvements, new commands for managing Microsoft 365 and everything on it, including upgrading your SharePoint framework projects to the latest version of SPFX.
Yay! Yeah, awesome. Now, we also had an article from Bert Janssen around the PnP Core SDK version 1.9. The core is the modern abstraction layer on top of CSAM, REST, and Graph, and combining like best of the all worlds. And there's a lot of customers and partners using that. A lot of improvements there, a lot of contributors as well. So thank you for being part of the open source community in here. And then we had an article from Louisa Fries around how to add and remove owners from Power Automate Flow with CLI Microsoft 365.
And that TLDR is just awesome. Using CLI for Microsoft 365, you can easily add and remove owners of Flow. Duh.
Done.
It's a fact.
Peter Wenstra had an article on create a stack trace in Power Automate Flows. So stack trace in the Power Automate Flows. Now I get it. So basically understanding where it fails and what's happening and what is the call stack. So that's actually really, really cool for sure. And how do you actually queue the things up? So awesome stuff there. Good reference point. And then there was a Graph Developer Proxy article from Kun Sangani.
Exactly. So he gives a great overview about how you can use Microsoft Graph Developer Proxy to mock APIs, right? Because you can do many things with that. And one of the features that we offer is mocking. So you don't need to call live API. And with that, instead, you can return a mock object, which is useful for things like when you deal with things like limited credits, tokens, no access tokens for the whole team, or data that is sensitive on time, like, for example, insights on Microsoft Graph. So really, really cool overview to how to use that ability.
Absolutely. Then Kasper Larsson had an article on the choice of hiding content from Microsoft Search, a good reference point on basically hiding individual content and individual areas within the Microsoft Search data layout. Didn't we? Did it?
I think so. It reminds me that we had
it is actually
discussion.
that's actually we had this exactly the same discussion last time. You are sorry, Kasper. No, you're gone. Now, Liam clearly had an article on Microsoft 365, A Tale of Online Security, Chapter 1. So basically, reference points and storylines on individual.
Actually, this is a story Liam took writing. So this is really cool. It's really cool way to get it expressed. To how could you look and learn about this concept? So really cool to see him actually write a story.
And there's actually more than that. So we have a reference on chapter 1, there's chapter 2 and chapter 3. Yeah, so Liam is keeping us in suspense. Are they gonna leak information from the terminal or not?
Stay tuned for the next episode.
Xiao Ferreira had a new article on what's new in Microsoft Viva, March 2023 edition, basically listing all of the different updates, what we've been having across the Microsoft Viva with all of the Viva modules within March. So thank you, Xiao, on that one. Really, 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 really great list of things. Absolutely brilliant. Then we had a new video from Paolo Pialorsi, episode 243, using Bicep in Azure DevOps pipelines. And Paolo has been talking about Biceps, and now he's expanding that a bit more with the latest videos.
Cool.
Kiss biceps, you know.
Yes, flexing those muscles.
Yes. Shane had an article on first look at Power App's modern controls. So basically, based on that announcement, which we just went through, and there's a new set of controls which are available, and then how do they actually work and what's available. Good walkthrough on individual controls and individual things, what they actually do. So awesome stuff there. Juliana De Luca had a new video on how to use Microsoft Loop for mobile. That's actually really cool as well. So how to use that, how to capability design, that's 4 minutes and 47 seconds. So a really nice quick summary on, okay, this is how it works. I get it. That's pretty sweet. And then from the Laura Rogers and Jolene Jobson, Power Hour list templates with approvals built in. So we're looking into now start rolling out individual approvals, and actually there's going to be more announcements on list templates and flow integrations pretty soon as well. So, but this is really cool. So you can actually create a list template or use list templates where the approval process is inside of it already. So walking through on that. Cool. I guess that's it for this time. A lot of articles to walk through, a lot of cool announcements, and this is not the end of the spring, right?
No. Well, I mean, it clearly isn't in Finland, right? Like you still have snow.
Yeah, true. That can take a while to melt, so it's fine. It's fine. I think we'll have +10 on the weekend. We'll see. So should help on getting rid of that. But I guess that's it for this one. We already went through the weekly things with Erwin. Erwin, thank you for joining us. And for next week, do we do a quick teaser? Who do we have for next week?
Yes, so we will be back on Thursday. We will be recording early because of Easter, right? So yeah. I don't know about you. I am away on Friday and Monday, which means we are recording early. So that is that. I think, do you want to talk more? No, we won't.
Okay, let's not actually tell who it is or who she is. So some say she is well known by the community. Anyway, so I guess that's good teaser. You'll see it on next week. So thank you for watching and thank you for listening. Please have to use #PnP Weekly in Twitter, and that's the easiest way for us to find out awesome stuff what you're writing. And please give us feedback. What works, what doesn't work. Always welcome. Thanks everybody. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.